Well, hello there, squirrels and squirrelettes. I hadn't been harking near as much today. And keep it on the Zyrtec. Alrighty then. Let's take up where we left off. Let me go back and read the last sentence. It was plain that the utmost the pony would consent to do was go in his own way up any street that the old gentleman particularly wished to traverse, but that it was an understanding between them that he must do this after his own fashion or not at all. As they passed where he sat, Kit looked so wistfully at the little turnout that the old gentleman looked at him. Kit rising and putting his hand to his hat, the old gentleman intimated to the pony that he wished to stop, to which proposal the pony, parentheses, who seldom objected to that part of his duty, graciously acceded. "I beg your pardon, sir," said Kit. "I'm sorry you stopped, sir. I only meant, did you want your horse minded?" "I'm going to get down in the next street," returned the old gentleman. "If you'd like to come on after us, you may have the job." Kit thanked him and joyfully obeyed. The pony ran off at a sharp angle to inspect a lamp post on the opposite side of the way, and then went off at a tangent to another lamp post on the other side. Having satisfied himself that they were of the same pattern and materials, he came to a stop, abruptly absorbed in meditation. "Will you go on, sir?" said the old gentleman gravely, "or are we to wait here for you till it's too late for our appointment?" The pony remained immovable. "Oh, you naughty Whisker," said the old lady. "Fie upon you! I'm ashamed of such conduct." The pony appeared to be touched by this appeal to his feelings, for he trotted on directly through, though in a sulky manner, and stopped no more until he came to a door whereon was a brass plate with the words, "Witherdin Notary." Here the old gentleman got out and helped out the old lady, and then took from under the seat a nosegay resembling in shape and dimensions a full-sized warming pan with the handle cut short off. This the old lady carried into the house with a staid and stately air, and the old gentleman, in parentheses, who had a club foot, followed close upon her. They went, as it was easy to tell from the sound of their voices, into the front parlor, which seemed to be a kind of office. The day being very warm and the street a quiet one, the windows were wide open, and it was easy to hear through the Venetian blinds all that passed inside. At first there was a great shaking of hands and shuffling of feet, succeeded by the presentation of the nosegay, for a voice supposed by the listener to be that of Mr. Witherdin, the notary, was heard to exclaim a great many times, "Oh, delicious! Oh, fragrant indeed!" And a nose, almost supposed to be the property of that gentleman, also supposed, was heard to inhale the scent with a snuffle of exceeding pleasure. "I brought it in honor of the occasion, sir," said the old lady. "Ah, an occasion indeed, ma'am, an occasion which does honor to me, ma'am." "Honor to me," rejoined Mr. Witherton, the notary. I have had many a gentleman articled to me, ma'am, many a one. Some of them are now rolling in riches, unmindful of their old companion and friend, ma'am. Others are in the habit of calling upon me to this day, and saying, "Mr. Witherden, some of the pleasantest hours I ever spent in my life were spent in this office, were spent, sir, upon this very stool. but there was never one among the number, ma'am, attached as I have been to many of them, of whom I augured such bright things as I do of your only son." "Oh dear," said the old lady, "how happy you do make us when you tell us that, to be sure." "I tell you, ma'am," said Mr. Witherden, "what I think is an honest man, which, as the poet observes, is the noblest work of God. I agree with the poet in every particular, ma'am. The mountainous Alps on the one hand, or a hummingbird on the other, is nothing in point of workmanship to an honest man or woman. "Anything that Mr. Witherden can say of me," observed a small, quiet voice, "I can say with interest of him, I'm sure." "It's a happy circumstance, a truly happy circumstance," said the notary, to happen too upon his 28th birthday, and I hope I know how to appreciate it. I trust, Mr. Garland, my dear sir, that we may mutually congratulate each other upon this auspicious occasion." To this the old gentleman replied that he felt assured they might. There appeared to be another shaking of hands in consequence, and when it was over, the old gentleman said that though he said it who should not, he believed no son had ever been a greater comfort to his parents than Abel Garland had been to his, marrying as his mother and I did late in life, sir, after waiting for a great many years until we were well enough off, coming together when we were no longer young, and then being blessed with one child who has always been dutiful and affectionate. Why, it's a source of great happiness to us both, sir." "Of course it is, I have no doubt of it," returned the notary in a sympathizing voice. "It's the contemplation of this sort of thing that makes me deplore my fate in being a bachelor. There was a young lady once, sir, the daughter of an outfitting warehouse of the first respectability, but that's a weakness. Chuckster, bring in Mr. Abel's articles." "You see, Mr. Witherden," said the old lady, "that Abel has not been brought up like the run of young men. He's always had a pleasure in our society and always been with us. Abel has never been absent from us for a day, has he, my dear?" "Never, my dear," returned the old gentleman, "except when he went to Margate one Saturday with Mr. Tom Kinley, that had been a teacher at that school he went to, and came back upon the Monday, but he was very ill after that, you remember, my dear. It was quite a dissipation." "He was not used to it, you know," said the old lady, "and he couldn't bear it, that's the truth. Besides, he had no comfort in being there without us, had nobody to talk to, or enjoy himself with." Where'd I get listen? "That was it, you know," interposed the same small, quiet voice that had spoken once before. "I was quite abroad, mother, quite desolate, and to think that the sea was between us. Oh, I never shall forget what I felt when I first thought that the sea was between us." "Very natural under the circumstances," observed the notary. "Mr. Abel's feelings did credit to his nature, and credit to your nature, ma'am, and his father's nature and human nature. I trace the same current now flowing through all this quiet and unobtrusive proceedings. I'm about to sign my name, you observe, at the foot of the articles which Mr. Chuckster will witness, and placing my finger upon this blue wafer with the vandyked corners, I'm constrained to remark in a distinct tone of voice, "Don't be alarmed, ma'am. Ma'am, it is merely a form of law that I deliver this as my act and deed. Mr. Abel will place his name against the other way for repeating the same cabalistic words, and the business is over. You see how easily these things are done?" There was a short silence, apparently while Mr. Abel went through the prescribed form, and then the shaking of hands and shuffling of feet were renewed, and shortly afterwards there was a clinking of wine glasses and a great talkativeness on the part of everybody. In about a quarter of an hour, Mr. Chuckster, with pen behind his ear and his face inflamed with wine, appeared at the door, and condescending to address Kit by the jocose appellation of young snob, informed him that the visitors were coming out. Out they came forthwith. Mr. Witherden, who was a short, chubby, fresh-colored, brisk, and pompous, leading the old lady with extreme politeness, and the father and son following them arm in arm. Mr. Abel, who had a quaint, old-fashioned air about him, looked nearly of the same age as his father, and bore a wonderful resemblance to him in face and figure, though writing something of his full, round, cheerfulness, and substituting, I can't wait till I get some new glasses, substituting in its place a timid reserve. In other respects, in the neatness of the dress, and even in the club foot, he and the old gentleman were precisely alike. Having seen the old lady safely in her seat, and assisted in the arrangement of her cloak and small basket, which formed an indispensable portion of her equipage, Mr. Abel got into a little box behind, which had evidently been made for his express accommodation, and smiled at everybody present by turns, beginning with his mother and ending with the pony. There was then a great to-do to make the pony hold up his head, that the bearing rein might be fastened. At last even this was effected, and the old gentleman, taking his seat and the reins, put his hand in his pocket to find a sixpence for Kit. 6 pence. He had no sixpence, neither had the old lady, nor Mr. Abel, nor the notary, nor Chuckster. The old gentleman thought a shilling too much, but there was no shop in the street to get change at, so he gave it to the boy. "There," he said jokingly, "I'm coming here again next Monday at the same time, and mind you're here, my lad, to work it out." "Thank you, sir," said Kit. "I'll be sure to be here." He was quite serious, but they all laughed heartily at his saying so, especially Mr. Chuckster, who roared outright and appeared to relish the joke amazingly. As the pony with a presentiment that he was going home, or a determination that he would not go anywhere else, which was the same thing, trotted away pretty nimbly, Kit had no time to justify himself, and went his way also. Having expended his treasure in such purchases as he knew would be most acceptable at home, not forgetting some seed for the wonderful bird, he hastened back as fast as he could, so elated with his success and great good fortune that he more than half expected Nell and the old man would arrive before him. And that's all of chapter 14. Chapter 15. Often while they were yet pacing the silent streets of the town on the morning of their departure, the child trembled with a mingled sensation of hope and fear, as in some far-off figure, imperfectly seen in the clear distance, her fancy traced a likeness to honest Kit. But although she would greatly have given him her hand and thanked him for what he had said at their last meeting, it was always a relief to find when they came nearer to each other that the person who approached was not he, but a stranger, for even if she had not dreaded the effect which the sight of him might have wrought upon her fellow traveler, she felt that to bid farewell to anybody now, and most of all to him who had been so faithful and so true, was more than she could bear. It was enough to leave dumb things behind and objects that were insensible both to her love and sorrow. To have parted from her only friend upon the threshold of that wild journey would have wrung her heart indeed. Why is it that we can better bear to part in spirit than in body, and while we have the fortitude to act farewell, have not the nerve to say it? On the eve of long voyages, or an absence of many years, friends who are tenderly attached will separate with the usual look, the usual pressure of the hand, planning one final interview for the morrow, while each well knows that it is but a poor feint to save the pain of uttering that one word, and that the meeting will never be. Should possibilities be worse to bear than certainties? We do not shun our dying friends. They not having distinctly taken leave of one among them, whom we left in all kindness and affection, will often embitter the whole remainder of a life. The town was glad with morning light. Places that had shown ugly and distrustful all night long now wore a smile, and sparkling sunbeams danced on chamber windows, and twinkling through blind and curtain before sleepers' eyes, shed light even into dreams, and chased away the shadows of the night. Birds in hot rooms, covered up close and dark, felt it was morning, and chafed and grew restless in their little cells. Bright-eyed mice crept back to their tiny homes and nestled timidly together. The sleek house cat, forgetful of her prey, sat winking at the rays of sun starting through keyhole and cranny in the door, and longed for her stealthy run and warm sleep bask outside. The nobler beasts, confined in dens, stood motionless behind their bars and gazed on fluttering boughs and sunshine peeping through some little window. With eyes in which old forests gleamed, then trod impatiently the track their prisoned feet had worn, and stopped and gazed again. Men in their dungeons stretched their cramped cold limbs and cursed the stone that no bright sky could warm. The flowers that sleep by night opened their gentle eyes and turned them to the day. The light creation's mind was everywhere, and all things owned its power. The two pilgrims, often pressing each other's hands or exchanging a smile or cheerful look, pursued their way in silence. Bright and happy as it was, there was something solemn in the long deserted street. deserted streets, from which, like bodies without souls, all habitual character and expression had departed, leaving but one dead uniform repose. That made them all alike. One was so still at that early hour that the few pale people whom they had met seemed as much unsuited to the scene as the sickly lamp which had been here and there left burning was powerless and faint in the full glory of the sun. Before they had penetrated very far into the labyrinth of men's abodes which yet lay between them and the outskirts, this aspect began to melt away, and noise and bustle to usurp its place. Some straggling carts and coaches rumbling by first broke the charm, then others came, then others yet more active, then a crowd. The wonder was at first to see a tradesman's window open, but it was a rare thing soon to see one closed. Then smoke rose slowly from the chimneys, and sashes were thrown up to let in air, and doors were opened, and servant girls, looking lazily in all directions but their brooms, scattered brown clouds of dust into the eyes of shrinking passengers, or listened disconsolately to milkmen who spoke of country fairs and told of wagons in the mews with awnings and all things complete, and gallant swains to boot, which another hour would see upon their journey. This quarter past, they came upon the haunts of commerce and great traffic, where many people were resorting, and business was already rife. The old man looked about him with a startled and bewildered gaze, for these were places that he hoped to shun. He pressed his finger on his lip and drew the child along by narrow courts. Narrow courts and winding ways, nor did he seem at ease until they had left it far behind, often casting a backward look towards it, murmuring that ruin and self-murder were crouching in every street and would follow if they scented them, and they could not fly too fast. Again, this quarter past, they came upon a straggling neighborhood, where the mean houses, parceled off in rooms and windows patched with rags and paper, told of the told of the pauper shelter there. The shops sold goods that only poverty could buy, and sellers and buyers were pinched and griped. It's not gripped. Alike, here were poor streets, where faded gentility essayed with scanty space, and shipwrecked means to make its last feeble stand, but tax gatherer and creditor came there as elsewhere, and the poverty that yet faintly struggled was hardly less squalid and manifest than that which had long ago submitted and given up the game. I think I'm going to stop there, guys. I'm having a time with seeing. I'm awake. It's my doggone eyes. Yeah, and there is quite a bit more to go, so I'll get it hopefully tomorrow. Lord willing and the creek don't rise. See you in the YT streets. I won't see you again till Wednesday, and I'll be at Hannah's house, not Lindsay's, to take care of Nikolai from Wednesday through Sunday, and then I can come home on Monday. Love y'all. Be sweet. Don't be ugly. Bye-bye.